Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
Hi, Craig. I'm Danny van Leeuwen. I'm also known as Health Hats, and I'm known as Health Hats because I am a person with multiple sclerosis. I've been a care partner to several family members' end of life journey. I'm a nurse. I have led several electronic health record implementations, and I've been in the C suite of healthcare. So I wear a lot of hats.
Figuratively, for sure, and literally.
Hmm.
I Before we pressed record, we kind of got into the topic of how you see podcasting as being a very rich experience for you, like all the things that you get from it. And then we started talking about audio, and you mentioned blending, how podcasting being an audio medium, it blends together a number of different things that you already were passionate about. And I think it's super important to know, like you've also done significant amount of blogging, and we also talked about how that's very unidirectional. I totally agree. I blog a lot and it's very one way, and I get on my soapbox way too often. Craig does not need a megaphone. What do you recall what your experience was? So you have a musical background, you're also a musician. And when you started podcasting, and the first time you brought somebody else in and realized, I'm going to say, realized the power of having that second person engage in a conversation. Do you remember what that was like, and like what sort of ideas came to mind from that opening?
Well, actually, my first episode was it was the anniversary of my son's dying, and I I had this video, a
Mm,
VHS video that my boss at the time had videoed an interview with my son at my 50th birthday about 2 months before he died.
hmm
And so I scraped the audio off of that video and then told stories about, our experience together, especially in his last couple of years. And so I didn't really interview anybody in that first episode, but it was like, oh my God, it's sort of like I held my nose, I took a drink, and jumped right in
mm.
to the possibilities of audio. And I didn't really add um, music until, a few episodes in. I have a cousin who's a musician, and I was talking to him, and um, I, oh, hang on one second, okay?
Sure.
Um, yeah. Anyway, and so
You talk about adding
he's a
music, yeah.
musician, and he did some work. He did some, created some pieces for me to use. And so that was, then it opened up my mind to the possibilities of music, and oh my goodness, I'm a musician, and you know, just
So
how
yeah,
to
so
do
many
that.
things become possible when
Yeah.
you realize that you had. It's almost like a cubeville, like a giant old office space where you have all these cubes. When you stand up, it's like the whole, like everything is different. They call that,
Yeah.
used to call it like gophering. When you stand up and look around, you suddenly realize that yeah, the space that you were in, all these parameters are artificial.
Yes.
What is the thing that's currently, like, when you're creating your show, what's the thing that you're currently most curious about? Is it the other people? Is it the topics? Is it trying to succeed at a kind of communication? Is it, you know
Well, it's sort of yes. I feel like it shifts. So so I'm in this business, and I of healthcare, and I'm in this uh, business about learning, and so I sort of follow my nose, and whether it's um, I meet people who are, or I know people who are really interesting, and so it's just the individual, um, or like right now I'm on a, or I get on a kick, you
mm,
know,
Right.
for one of the first kicks I ever had was um, young adults with complex medical conditions who are transitioning from pediatric to adult medical care. And I interviewed a series of people, the young adult or was a young adult, a parent, and then the two of them together. And I did a series, so then it was like, it was like that
Huh.
was the series.
The through
Um,
line. Yeah.
or it's about chronic pain, or it's like, um, so it depends. Um,
Do you okay? All right, you're a smart guy. You do it a lot, and you're really clearly curious. Um, so one question I have is, yeah, how do you rein that in? Like, there's only so many waking hours, and you can only do so much stuff. So how do you rein that in? And I'm wondering if audio, like, oh, this has to fit in. I'm air quoting, fit in podcast. Does that help you? Like, well, I can't do that. That's a visual concept.
no, no, that that's never come up. But what has come up is that I did 145 weekly episodes and 500 weekly blog plus podcast episodes. And just recently, I decided that each episode takes from 6 to 30 hours to produce. And
Right.
so first I went to a alternating interview and on mic episode. And then recently I shifted to giving myself 2 weeks to produce um, the interview episodes. Just it was getting to be a lot,
Hmm.
just a lot. And so I'm really appreciating being able to take my time on the interview episodes.
Right. Are there
And
any
it's more
other
time to play music, so that's good.
yes, the mistress du jour eats all of my time, right? I
Mm-hmm.
go way down the rabbit hole. Are there any other things like either systems or mindsets or processes that you use to sort of, when you find a new possibility to sort of figure out like, do I want to pursue this possibility versus continue, like if you did 1,000 episodes the way you're going now, that would do a ton of good. Like, how do you decide whether to just keep doing what you're doing or whether to go in a direction?
I don't know. I just do it. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm not that's not the kind of thoughtfulness that I have.
Hmm.
Um, my thoughtfulness is more, what's the story I'm trying to tell? Um, that this is, we could be, each episode could be about 20 different things. Well, that's just too
Yes.
much for listeners. What
Yes.
are the two or three that are really important? And unlike you, who doesn't edit at all, I'm a ruthless, or I'm learning to be a more and more ruthless editor.
Editor.
Um, and I actually really like the editing process, um, because I'm a person that the way my brain works is, when I'm done talking to you, I will have forgotten the whole conversation. When I finish reading a book, I have forgotten the book.
Hmm.
And so the editing process allows me to open my brain and store that information differently, and appreciate what just happened.
Hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that we talked about that. It's like it's a new discovery. um, and I do, every episode I do what I call an article grade transcript, which means that my what I know is that at least half of my followers are not listeners, they're readers. And I respect that. And so I started doing transcripts, but audio transcripts are not that interesting. We talk circular, we in fits and starts. It's not that readable. And so I do, I edit for readability, which has the additional bonus for me in my work is I have developed quite the library of material that, I have we'll have a consulting gig, and there's something that comes up. Well, I've already done the work,
Hmm.
and I can just pull that, and whether it's and the product is written, auditory, or video, I have the material, and so I've already done the work much of the time, and that is really helpful.
I'm really glad to hear you talk about the written side of it because that's something I've started. I've done one out of hundreds of conversations that I have transcripts for, um, and I suspect that I would get better at it the more that I do them. But I'm thinking that that's a brilliant way to. I was thinking like how to integrate the learning. So it's tough when you're
Mhm.
recording. You're only half of your mind is in the conversation. So if you listen to it again while editing, that's one way to hear it. To be exposed to it a second time. But um, I'm I'm curious about if you've written a bunch of articles. What are you what are you thinking when you look at that transcript and you're trying to I'm going to say change it into readable materials? You're trying to change the voice entirely. What are you thinking as you're looking at that raw transcript? Are you imagining the reader? Are you do you have like a that's not interesting enough, or are you trying to make the whole thing be a coherent story? Like, how does that process work?
Well, it's a good question. Well, back to, um, actually, my process is every episode has what I call a proem, which is like a preface,
Mhm.
and a reflection. So, which is me introducing the episode and then reflecting on the episode. And I start to write the proem. So I finish the episode, and then it's time for then some time goes on because I have quite a queue, and I'll go back and I'll listen to the raw, and then I'll start to write the proem, which then gives me the okay, this is, or I might start writing it even before I listen, because this is why I did it.
Yeah, it falls out of your head, right?
Right, and it falls out of my head, right, and it helps me then to shape what are what is the story here, what's my story here, like why do I care, why did I even do this, and I'm a storyteller, so I've got a million stories, and so I try to get a sense of why this topic, why this person, what touched a nerve in me, and then I do my editing. Well, then I go through it, and then I try to do, like, break it up into pieces
Hmm.
and give things temporary headings, and then that's the way for me to be a ruthless editor,
Hmm.
because then I can take out sections,
Right.
and then I go through it and then just put my editor hat on, because I spent 15 years as an editor of a journal, and now I'm on the editorial team of another journal, and so I'm used to editing, and then I edit, just clean it up,
Hmm.
and remove the passive, and just
Right.
make it more crisp, so that when a person reads it, they'll want to keep reading it. Um, so yeah, so that's like what I do.
Thank you for sharing that. It's just me being selfish. I'm like, that's super helpful to help me, find because I'm like almost everything you're describing. Like, well, that sounds really hard to do because I've tried to do it. I'm like, okay, keep doing it. I think, as for my
Yeah,
own,
keep
like,
doing it.
keep
Well,
doing
the
it.
other piece of that is that, I mean, you and I met right in uh, um,
Yeah, I don't know if it
TPF
was TPF
two,
three
right?
or I was only in
Two.
three. I was in
Oh, well, then
three.
we met. Okay, so I was in two with
Yeah,
Steve Hetherington,
yeah. And were
and
you? I think you were back for three, like as a
no, I
remarkable.
wasn't.
Oh,
No, I only did one, and but I so I all those that's been like more than 3 years,
yes.
and we have a weekly call where we talk all things podcasting and life, and then I host a every other week like critique group where we critique each other's episodes, and we do two every week, or
Nice.
every call,
Every
so
meeting,
every
yeah.
other week. And so that's where I learn a lot about the art of this medium,
Hmm.
is with this small group of people who we've been working together for a lot of years, um, because I see what they do, and they're with Steve's group. I'm the only healthcare person, which is great, because I get to see people, and everybody's got such different styles, and so I steal stuff all the
Right.
time, and they help me work through you know, dilemmas and answering the questions you're asking because
Mhm.
they come up, of course.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the writing. Um, I'm just like so happy to hear anybody ever talk about doing the hard work of bringing like there's an experiential part to experiencing the people on the podcast when one is listening, and then there's that other part which is okay, that's great, but now I want to get from that, I want to hang in my head new information, and I think the written form is better for that. Even people who say they're an auditory learner, I think they maybe they just haven't encountered enough well written material, but I really
No,
love.
no. People have different brains. I'm
Yeah.
convinced.
Mm.
And the no, people just like my son's an auditory. One of my sons is an auditory learner, and he's been that way all his life.
Mm.
And I mean, he reads. He reads. He's a prolific reader. But I really think, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I think that people are it's amazing how different people's brains are, and so I feel like I wear all these different hats, and my audience has many different hats. So I have people who identify as patients, I have people who follow me identify caregivers or as knowledge management professionals
Mm.
or clinicians or administrators or policymakers, and so I like to think about all those different brains. And, I have this image of a shelf of bobbleheads above my screen where, and I see, there's Mary Sue. There's, there's Susan. There's Michael, and I picture them and so I make sure that I am talking to each of them.
Mm.
Now, you know, being a Rosetta Stone of healthcare. What I say on my lead is that I know a little bit about a lot of healthcare and not a lot about that much, and the but I try to speak to each of them, and that includes people who are readers, who I know are readers.
Mm.
I know that Sue is only reading me. She has no idea about the music that's in the podcast. No clue. Because she's just reading me and she'll never listen to my podcast. I just know. And that's all. But hey, she's been following me for like 7 years.
Yeah.
And so I honor her.
Yeah, I think there's deep magic you've got there. The like I'm very intentional about thinking about what I'm doing in the audio part, but I have this feeling that if I was more intentional about going back through and like finding the pieces like you're doing that would serve a written learner, a reader, and then that would help me as much as it would help the people who are readers. So I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely onto something, and I'm really glad you shared all that. I think that's very helpful. I don't know if anybody else out there listening finds it helpful, but I find it super helpful. So thank you. As much as I hate to say it, that's 20 minutes.
There we go.
Here we
Well, that
go.
was great. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for
You're
sharing.
you're doing a mitzvah here, so I really appreciate it. All the work that you do.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
I'm mostly crazy excited to see that people like my greatest giggle fits happen when people grab something I've created and then build like do their own thing with it. Like, whoa, I didn't expect them to do that. That's how I know it's like Lego blocks. I threw the Legos
Yes.
on the floor or on the table and people grab them. I'm like, yes, okay, Lego, this is a win. So cool. So anyway,
Okay.
thanks for
Thank
taking the
you.
time. I know how hard it is to schedule. Thanks, Danny.
Yep. Take care of yourself.